Okay, guys, so we're back, and right now I'm going to show you how you can kind of access the quizzes and the questions from the views file. And what I want to do, I want to actually create a new page. Maybe I can use this page, quiz page, because this quiz page right now, it's boring. It doesn't have anything. It only has, you know, HTTP response. This is the quiz page, but maybe we should have kind of more interesting stuff here. So again, to kind of remind you of what we've done, the quiz page is going to be, this function is going to be triggered. Let me go to the URLs when we go to kind of quiz. So if I run my server here, and if I go here, and if I go to quiz, you don't see that yet, but I can move things around here. So this is the quiz page, which just says this is the quiz page. So I'm going to go to my templates, and I'm going to create a quiz HTML, and I do that typically by copying login, and of course then I can get rid of everything in login. So right now I'm in quiz, the quiz file, and I'm going to get rid of everything. So it's going to be just essentially a blank HTML file. And in my views, I'm going to use that instead of HTTP response. I'm going to use render. So I'm going to return render. If you remember, request equals to request. We haven't talked about that, but you don't need to worry too much about that. We will talk about that at some point. But we talked about, of course, the template. We said that we have to specify the template, and it's going to be main quiz in this case. And of course, we talked about the context a lot. And in this case, it'll be an empty dictionary. And I can just comment this one. So I can save, I can go back to my page, I can refresh, and it'll actually work. So this is the HTML page, which is the quiz one. Let me show you that. Here, this is here. So if I do something here, this is the quiz page, HTML. If I save, if I go here, if I refresh, it'll say that. So again, because I'm going to quiz, and that's, you can see that in the URL here, that's going to trigger this function quiz page. And if I go there, I'm going to get the HTML page, but nothing, kind of render nothing. There's no rendering here that's happening because my context is empty. It's an empty dictionary. But typically there is some rendering, right? There's something like number is going to be 100. And you would kind of, in your quiz, you would put kind of between opening, those double opening curly braces, you would do num like that. And of course, when you refresh, you would see the number. Of course, we want to see something, we want to do something more interesting here, but that's a good start. Let me open the chat window, make sure that you don't have any questions. Swet, do you have a question, or did you forget to lower your hand? Okay. All right. So here in my views, I'd like to kind of access the first quiz, and I'd like to get the questions of the first quiz. So let's say this page, the quiz page, is a page that's going to display only maybe the questions for the first quiz. Let's kind of assume that. Let me show you how you can do this. Of course, we can always do something that we've done before, and I can say all, for example, questions. That's going to be actually not a new syntax here. I'm going to say all questions equals to questions.objects.filter, and then I can say quiz underscore ID, and then I can say that the quiz ID is 17. Because I think that was the quiz ID for the quiz, right? Yep, 17. I'm going to do something very simple here, and I'm going to just print all questions. And it'll print, of course, the questions here when I refresh the page. I'm just kind of debugging here, and you can see that it actually printed a query set that contains 2 questions. One of them has ID 2, and one of them has ID 3. And of course, these are the IDs of the 2 questions that we have, right? We have 2 and 3. Do you guys have any questions about that? So let me ask you something, since you're not kind of asking questions. If I do this, if I say print all questions 0 dot maybe question text, what do you think that's going to do? Think about that for a minute. Who knows the answer to this one? So Paul is saying it'll print the question text value for the first object in the query set. That's good. Anthony is saying the first question in the query set's text. The first question's text maybe in the query set. Okay, and that is correct. So if you look at the query set here, we have kind of two of them. One of them has ID 2, and that's really the first question. So if we go to the question here, the question text of the first one, which has ID 2, is going to be what's the capital of North Carolina. So that's really what should be printed. Let's kind of test it. You can see here it printed. Where is it? Did it print anything yet? Let me try to refresh again. Okay, so you see what it printed? It printed what is the capital of North Carolina. And that's really what we expect that will be printed, because again, we saw that the set contains 2 questions. And of course, the text of the first question is what is the capital of North Carolina? And of course, we can print the answers, right? We can say print all questions 0 dot, was it correct answer? Question correct answer? I forgot. And then maybe something like incorrect answer, I think. Incorrect answer 1, something like that. Let's go back, make sure that, okay, it's correct answer, incorrect answer 1. So that's right. I use the right kind of attribute names. So if I save this and if I go here, of course the server is going to restart. If I refresh, you can see that it's going to print what is the capital of North Carolina, Raleigh, Charlotte, and it'll, of course we can print the 2 other incorrect ones. And if I do this, if I refresh, and you can see that we have all of them. Okay. So there's a question, is there a difference between a query set and a list? Of course, they're different. They're very different, but you can still you can index both of them. So for example, you can use the square bracket to index elements. They have very they're different, but also they're similar. They're similar in the sense that you can kind of index them. They're similar in the sense that they have an order, so they're not sets, they're actually lists. Even though it says query set, but it's actually more of a list. That's interesting. It should be query list, maybe, if I were to, I would have to kind of think about it more, but query list also makes sense because these are ordered. So typically you can't index sets. Sets are not, so indexing sets a lot of the times not allowed because sets don't have an order, and you don't want to, you can loop through them, but typically when you use an index like this, you do that for an ordered kind of collection of items, so items that have a particular order. But yes, it's very similar to a list. Of course, query set by itself is an object, is a class type. So this is really the type here is query set, so it's not really a list. And of course, you can do more things with query sets than lists. So you can think of it as um, as a more powerful list, maybe. Um, okay. All right. So that's all good. We like that. Now, of course, we can also print the ID. All of that are things that you really probably should know for the, of course, the quiz ID. We can print the ID too. I mean, that's okay. The ID is going to be 2 and the quiz ID is going to be 17. So let me just do that and then I can talk about something else here. Okay, so you can see here the quiz ID is going to be a 17 and the ID of the question is going to be 2. So all of that kind of, again, should make sense. Now let me show you something that is going to be hopefully interesting. It's very useful and something that you cannot do in SQL. So here's what we can do using Django's object relational mapper. We can say print or other things, but let's start with print. All questions 0. And right now we can do dot quiz, not quiz underscore ID. Now, if you do dot quiz, essentially what this part is going to be, I'm going to repeat kind of that a few times, but let me say just one time slowly. When you do dot quiz, this whole portion, that the highlighted portion, is going to actually refer to the quiz, this entire quiz object. So again, question has a quiz underscore ID. We can do that. That's going to be 17. But if you use quiz without underscore ID, it's going to be the quiz object, essentially the row that has ID 17. So right now we're actually referring to exactly that. And from here, we can access those elements. So we can access, for example, the quiz title by accessing the quiz, not the quiz underscore ID. And this is extremely useful, extremely useful. So let me show you that. So here, I'm gonna do quiz dot, and I can say quiz title. And if I do that, this should print quiz 1 and between parentheses capitals. So I'm gonna save this and go to my web page and refresh. Do you guys see what happened here? Quiz 1 capitals. Do you have, let me pause here and see if you have any questions. I'll give you 30 seconds to ask questions. Do you guys have any questions about this? All right, I'm not really seeing any questions. So we can continue. All right. So so that way, so in summary, to summarize what we did here, using kind of this quiz attribute to access the quiz kind of attributes. So the quiz title is an attribute for quiz, and accessing quiz from a question allows us to kind of bypass accessing quiz like that. So we don't have to say, for example, kind of quiz dot objects dot filter, because we can get the quiz for a particular question by accessing the dot quiz attribute, which you don't see in a table. Again, in the table, you don't see quiz, you only see quiz underscore ID, but using just the quiz, which is what we defined in the models.py, as you can see here, we define quiz. Using the just quiz, we can access the attributes of the quiz that, of course, not any quiz, but the quiz that that has this ID. So that's how we do it. Let's see. Let's see what else we can do. Go back. Let's go back. Okay. So let's say I want to return all those questions to my template. So I'm going to have all questions, and I'm going to have all questions here. And I'm going to actually comment all of that. I'm not going to use the views anymore. All right, so I'm going to get all the questions for a particular quiz, and I'm going to send that to the template. So here's my quiz, and I'm going to loop through, and I can say for quiz in all questions, let's say for question, excuse me, in all questions, and I can say end for. And of course, here I can say question.question text. I can do that, and I can put that in a div. In a division here. I can make the font a little bit bigger. I can say, for example, font or style, font size, maybe 20 pixels. I can also say text align center, so that'll center the text. Okay, so here, if I refresh, you can see that it's going to ask the two questions. Of course, I can add margin here, and margin is going to kind of add some margin around those two questions, so it'll look better. And of course, I can display the answers, right? I can say after that, after you display the question, I want you to display the 4 answers. So here maybe I can say kind of div, and I can do the same thing. You can say style, font size, 20 pixels, text align, center, maybe, sure, margin, why not, 20 pixels. And here I'm going to say question dot correct answer, and I can do 4 of those. And this one is going to be incorrect answer 1, incorrect answer 2, incorrect answer 3. And of course, I can make them look like buttons, but essentially, that's really what we're doing. Now, of course, doing that will always display the correct answer at the beginning. We can kind of shuffle them. We can talk about that later. That's not really very important for now. Another thing that we can do, we can put everything in a div, in a division. So the question and the answers, and we can maybe create a border. So we can style, we can say border, kind of 1 pixel, light gray, and maybe solid. And I can say the radius of the border is going to be 5 pixels. And if you do that, and if you refresh, it'll create those borders around those questions. I'm going to add margin, and I'm going to actually stop styling it. That's not really, we shouldn't spend too much time here. So I just kind of added some margin around the question. So right now I have kind of 2 questions here. So even in the template, I can actually use the dot notation that I've used in the views to access attributes for the primary key table. So here, for example, after doing the question text, I can between parentheses say this. I can say question dot quiz ID. But this is something that you've already kind of knew because quiz ID is an attribute. So why would you not be able to do that? So I'm gonna do that. And you can see it says 17, 17. This is the quiz ID. But what you could do is you could say quiz dot. So right now you're accessing the quiz object, which is the row, and then you can say quiz title like that. And right now, if you refresh, you can see that I have the quiz name here. And this is extremely useful. So again, instead of getting the ID, which is 17, and then querying the database again, saying, get me the question, the quiz that has ID 17, and then get the text for that, we can just use the dot notation, just like how we've used it here, like that. We can use it either here, or we can also use it in the template, which is the HTML, and we can access those data points. So this is, we're having a discussion about objects relational mapper, Django's object relational mapper. And I'm showing you how you can, why people like to use Django's object relational mapper instead of SQL. So do you guys have any questions about this? Maybe we can remove those parentheses. Okay. Leaving the semicolon here. All right, do you guys have any questions or do you not have questions? So you're going to be quizzed on this next week. So if you have any questions, it's good to ask. Of course, if you don't, that's perfectly fine. Do you guys know how to kind of shuffle those answers? I mean, that's kind of a Python thing, not so much databases. But you can shuffle that. And what you can do, one thing that you can do here in the views is maybe you can loop through all those questions and create a new attribute that has the shuffled version of those for answers. That's kind of one way of doing it. So you can say, for example, I can say for question in all questions, and then I can say question dot shuffled answers equals to, and we can, for example, shuffle. We have to import shuffle. So I can import shuffle here. So shuffle is going to be a function in random. So I can say shuffle, and I can provide a list. I believe it's that. We can actually test it. So if I print shuffle 1, 2, 1, 3, 4, let me see what that's going to print. Let me refresh. It actually prints nothing. So maybe I'm going to say A equals to that, and then shuffle A, and then print A. So maybe that's how it should be done. I haven't used shuffle in a while. Okay, so you can see that it did shuffle the elements right now, 3, 1, 4. So if you refresh again, it'll be something else, 4, 3, 1. So maybe what you can do is you can say, I want the question dot shuffle answers to be equal to the list of answers. So it's going to be question dot correct answer, question, let me hit enter so that we can see all of that. Incorrect answer 1, question, incorrect answer 2, and then question dot incorrect answer 3. And then I can say question, I can say shuffle, question dot shuffled answers. So that's gonna, so here what I'm doing is I'm actually creating a new attribute on the fly and a new attribute for this object question. And I'm giving it all of the answers and I'm shuffling, you know, that list. And right now, if I were to print them, just to kind of print them, print question dot shuffled answer, just to show you that it should be shuffled. I'm going to refresh now. Right now, we don't need that. Save again. Let me hit refresh here. You can see that right now we're Charlotte, Asheville, Raleigh, Wilmington, and you can see these are shuffled. So the first one is not really the correct answer. And if you hit refresh again, you will see another kind of list. So you can see right now we start with, actually we still start with Charlotte, but then we go to Raleigh instead of Asheville. So they're actually different. And the idea is inside your HTML, instead of, not this HTML, instead of actually using those, you can use the shuffled answers. And then you can say .0. And .0 is going to give you the first element of a list. So all of that are stuff that, right now we're talking about Django. So that's good. I wanted to talk about kind of the Django's object relation and mapper more than Python. So if you do that, you're going to get the first element from the shuffled, second element from the shuffled, third element, and fourth element that has index 3. So if you do that, and if you refresh the page, you can see right now it has Wilmington, Charlotte, Asheville, Raleigh. If you refresh again, it's going to be a different list each time. And that's probably what you want to do. Do you guys have any questions about this? So what I did here again, I created a new attribute for all of those question objects, which was a list of all the answers. I shuffled them. Printing them is not necessary anymore. And in my HTML page, I access that list and I just display the first, second, third, fourth. And because they're shuffled, the first, second, third, fourth will be different each time. Do you guys have any questions about this? Sweat, do you have a question?
So Professor, what did you import in the views.py to get the shuffle working?
Yeah, so this is what I imported. I'm going to actually move it here. Let me actually just leave what I had before and let me import the shuffle here. Yeah, so shuffle is a function that's going to shuffle a list. And it's not going to return anything. It'll actually return none. It'll change the list. So if you have a list that looks like this, my list equals to 1, 2, 3. If you say shuffle my list, right now my list is going to contain the shuffled kind of elements. So that's really what I'm doing here. I created the list. I started with a correct answer, then incorrect 1, incorrect 2, incorrect 3. But because I'm shuffling them, the correct answer is going to be at a different place each time. So that's what I've used, yeah.
Okay.
So Blake is asking, what is choice? Choice is going to pick one element. So if you say choice, kind of my list is that's going to return something as opposed to this not returning anything. This will only change my list. This one will return something and it'll be just one element, one random element. This one, choice my list, is kind of equivalent to my list kind of rand int between 0 and the length of my list -1. So choice is going to say, for example, get me an element, and that the index of the element is going to be a random value, a valid value. It has to be valid. So it has to start from 0 to the length -1. So that is kind of identical to that. All right, do you guys have any questions? So I want to show you one more thing before we take a break, since we talked about this kind of idea of accessing lists using this kind of dot notation. You can do that for also query sets. So all questions is a query set. So if you try to kind of print, not let's say outside the loop, if you try to print all questions, and let me do HR with style width 100%. And let me create kind of one here, a line before, a line after. Let me create some margin here. I'm just styling it so that we can easily kind of see what's happening here. Okay, so I'm going to display all questions, and that's going to be a query set. So if I refresh this, you can see that it says it's a query set that contains, those two objects. Now you can actually access the first one using indexing, and you can do it using the same notation that we've used here for accessing the first and second or third or fourth. So here I can actually do .0. I can do that. And .0 is going to be the first one, which will be this one. So if I refresh, you can see that this is the first one. And of course, I can copy this, paste it, and I can say .1 here. So right now I'm accessing the first one and the second one, and they're going to be just printed next to each other. The reason why they're on the same line is because we haven't done the division. If you do division like that, then they're going to be on separate lines, because again, division takes the entire width of the page by default. So if you do that, they're going to be kind of on separate lines. And of course, from here, once you do .0, you can say .question text if you want. That's fine, that's allowed. Because when you say all questions .0, right now you're referring to one question. And for one question, you can get the question text, you can get the correct answer, you can get the incorrect answer 1, you can get any of that. So when you have a query set, you don't necessarily have to loop through the query set, although this is typically what we do. We loop through the query set, but we don't have to, because you can access, the first and second and third elements from the query set using this dot notation. Just like how you can access, a list using, square brackets. Same thing. All right, do you guys have any questions? All right, so let's take a break and let's continue at 1. So we'll talk from 1 to 2, and then we can end class. So I'm going to stop the recording, and I will see you at 1 p.m.